Hi there, welcome to another statistics video. This one is having a look at another measure of the spread. We've already seen a range and an interquartile range that measured the spread. This is another measure of the spread of scores called the standard deviation. Sounds tricky, but let's have a look. The standard deviation is a measure of the spread of a set of values. It's found by entering the values into a calculator. Now I'll be putting together another video sometime very soon to show you how to find the standard deviation on a calculator, but this video I wanted to introduce the idea of standard deviation so you knew what you're actually finding. The smaller the standard deviation, the more consistent the values. So if we get a small number for our standard deviation, the values are fairly close together and consistent. And the larger the standard deviations, the more spread out the values. So when we find the standard deviation for a couple of different data sets, we can tell whether a certain bunch of scores are more consistent than the other or not. And the standard deviation, this is the way I like to think of the standard deviation. It can be thought of as being the average distance that any typical score that you choose at random is away from the mean. So if the scores are all clumped around the mean in a small space, then there's not a very large distance between a typical score and the mean. But if the standard deviation is high, then there's a larger average distance that a typical score is away from the mean. So it's kind of like, I know the word mean kind of is synonymous or almost synonymous with the word average, but I like to think of the mean and then the average distance that the scores are away from that mean as my idea of standard deviation. Let's have a look on a couple of dot plots here. So here's a couple of dot plots, two different sets of scores. We notice on the top set of scores here, the scores are clumped around, well, four values take into account all the scores there. There's this second dot plot is all spread out. So I think you can tell which one might have this highest standard deviation. The top one, the values are clumped together. The bottom one, the values are all spread out. We could say one nice word to say about that is that it's consistent. Might be in a good way, I don't know, but you could have consistently poor scores in a test, but that wouldn't be a great idea. But their values are certainly like each other, aren't they? Which is the idea of consistency. But that set of scores, they would have a standard deviation that's on the low side. There's not very spread out. And remember, standard deviation is a measure of spread. So if there's not much spread, you'll get a low number for your standard deviation when you put all these figures into your calculator. And your standard deviation, when the scores are spread out, will be higher. So that's the two examples there of dot plots that just illustrate what the standard deviation's getting at. A bigger number will be indicating that the scores are spread out. A smaller number will be indicating that they are consistent or clumped together. So standard deviation is a measure of the spread of a set of values. It's thought of as being the average distance that a typical score is that you could choose away from the mean, how far it is away from the mean. Alright, so in another video that's coming up soon, we'll show you how to calculate the standard deviations on your calculator, but that's for another day. So that's the general idea of standard deviation. It's a measure of spread of scores. Thanks for listening. PeterBlakeMaths.com. Catch you next time.